In the early stages of many so-called romantic relationships, role-playing is quite common in order to attract and keep whoever is perceived by the ego as the one who is going to make me happy, make me feel special, and fulfill all my needs. I'll play who you want me to be, and you'll play who I want you to be. That's the unspoken and unconscious agreement. So that was definitely the case for me. In my late teens, basically the last year of my high school, I got into my first long-term relationship. I thought I was in love, and there were definitely some unconscious expectations there. Basically that he was supposed to make me feel special and worthy, and that he was going to make me happy. And that was definitely coming from my ego, right? I had all these egoic needs and wants, and that was, a time in my life where I was deeply unconscious. And Eckhart talks about how the ego is conditioned by the past, right? And so a big part of our past is our childhood. And because of my adverse childhood experiences, I really didn't believe that I was ever good enough. And so I was always looking for external validation. And so, having this kind of relationship for the first time, I had all these expectations. There was definitely an unspoken agreement, basically, that I was willing to play the role, basically that I'll be everything you want me to be, as long as you continue to make me feel like I am good enough, That was the unspoken, agreement. And so further along our relationship, there was a time when I caught him lying to me a few times about things that I found pretty important, and that completely broke my trust. He lied to me about hanging out with other girls that he had recently met at the time. The issue wasn't that he made friends with and was hanging out with other girls. The issue was that he lied to me about it. But he assured me that nothing happened and that they were only friends, and that he wouldn't lie about it again. And naively, I believed him. But then I caught him lying again a couple of more times about who he was hanging out with, and it made me even more suspicious. But again, he reassured me that they were only friends and that nothing was going on. But my intuition was telling me otherwise. I started questioning why he was even lying about it in the first place. I knew at the time that it would have been a deal breaker for me if he cheated on me. But I had no proof of him cheating and only had his word. And I didn't trust my intuition. I thought I was overthinking it and making a bigger deal about it than it should have been. It wasn't until later, when we broke up for the final time, that I learned of, and it was confirmed, that he had been cheating on me the whole time we were together. I, despite all that, tried to make the relationship work because he had made all these promises and, but I couldn't trust him. And so it definitely triggered my ego, and I became that crazy girlfriend. As much as I, hated that part of my life and hated being that person, I felt like it was this crazy entity that overtook me and I had no control over it. I remember I used to be pretty judgmental about, other girlfriends that were crazy and stuff, and thought oh, I'll never do that. I'll never be like that, because I thought I was more understanding. I thought that I was more cool about things. But having this experience of having my trust broken and being lied to more than once really did, shatter me. It definitely triggered my ego. My ego felt so insecure, not safe. And so, what did it do? It tried to, do things to basically protect itself, right? I became the controlling girlfriend. I became the insecure, angry girlfriend who would get jealous about everything. Obviously, going through that experience, I get it. That was definitely, when I look back to that, I'm like, wow, that really is just the ego getting deeply triggered and trying to do all it can to feel safe. That was a time in my life that I'm definitely not proud of, kind of embarrassing, but that was basically the peak of my overtly crazy ego and pain body. It was just a crazy and intense period of my life. And it took me a while to realize this, but that was not love. Even though we said we loved each other, that was not love whatsoever. As Eckhart says, it was basically an intensification of egoic wanting and needing. And I needed him to fulfill my egoic needs, right? I just felt like there was such an addiction to this relationship that basically no matter how hard I tried to like walk away from it, I just couldn't. Even though I knew it was not healthy, I knew that, you know, I valued trust a lot, and he wasn't, no matter how many times he promised me and then broke those promises, like I just couldn't walk away for whatever reason. We would get into these cycles of always getting into fights because remember, I was still really insecure. I was still so angry and jealous and everything. And I just straight up didn't trust him. And so we would always get into these fights. Then we would break up. But then next week we would get back together. And so this dysfunctional cycle just kept going on for like another 2, almost 3 years. I'm embarrassed to say, but it took me a while to really learn my lesson, obviously. I just had this deep attachment to him, like of what he represented to me, right? Because I basically believed that he was going to be the one to make me feel good enough. I put all my like self-worth in his hands. And I also, you know, this was obviously coming from my ego, obviously, at the time. But I weirdly had this belief that this was the only relationship I was going to get and that I had to make it work. I don't know why I believed that, but I really did at the time feel like if this relationship doesn't work out, I'll be alone forever or no one will love me, right? Those were the fears that I had going in the background of my mind. And I think that's what was feeding the ego. And so that's why the ego was hanging on so hard, trying to make it work. So this is an example of a relationship based on ego. Love, especially real love, doesn't have any expectations. And I feel that if you have expectations for someone else to fulfill your needs, that's usually an egoic need. And I feel like a lot of less mature relationships like this one is usually one that's just feeding each other's egoic needs. It's not to say that it can't grow into a mature kind of love or anything like that, or that all relationships are like this. I'm just saying that because most of us are still identified with the ego, that the relationships we may get into, especially less mature ones, will probably be one that's feeding each other's like needs on an egoic level. So I guess that's it for today. So thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next time.